Well, yet another EFCC chairman. Of course, you can do the count yourself now, and it's all about an institution, not an individual, but every institution is led by someone. So this is where we are now. Where do we go from here, especially in the fight against corruption in Nigeria? Two gentlemen joined us this morning to have this conversation. Fred Nzako joins us here in our Lagos studio. He is a legal practitioner. Thank you so much for joining us. As well as Dr. Oke Ikechukwu, who is Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. He joins us from our studio in Abuja. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. Let me begin with you, Dr. Ikechukwu. Well, we are here again. It would seem like at the beginning of every tenure, there is a lot of expectation, there's a lot of hopes. And then maybe after some time, we begin to have some kind of decline in tempo. But first of all, from what you know of this new EFCC chairman, how high are your hopes?
The issue is not even whether I have high hopes or not. There's the policy and there's the politics. First of all, I want to look at, he's a young man, so that's a good sign. He's also coming from within the system, that's also a good sign. Part of the issue is that he's not a serving police officer. I think with his tenure, it's quite possible that there will be some measure of sustained professionalization of the EFCC, so that the police remains the police and keeps its work, and the EFCC becomes more and more specialized and more professionalized in that regard. As for hope, well, hope is always a function of expectations. Listening to him speak, he is calm. He does not present an offensive personality or visage to the public. And in fact, he comes across as a well-trained. Investigators have a certain stability and they pick issues very quiet, very carefully, and one after the other. So on the face of it, he looks good. But as for hope, hope can only be sustained if he's able to successfully navigate the politics of his position against the background of pressures that are going to come from interest groups, from politicians, from all manner of persons and establishments. So I do not want to speak about hope at the moment. Hope can be misguided or misinformed. I would rather look at the facts, and the information available in the public domain shows that he's a well-trained officer. He's competent. He's trained by some of the best institutions in crime and financial investigation. So if we are to ride on those, then that will be something good to start with. But to simply now say that EFCC will become a wonder, he has a lot of work to do. Fortunately, he's aware of it, because there are also within the organization he's going to enter individuals who are not happy that he's the new chairman. Practices that the former leadership may not be aware of or may not have encouraged, but which he may discover and want to deal with. So it's not about to have honeymoon. Nigerians have grown increasingly skeptical about the organization and people working there, and he came out as an insider. It would be good for him to reaffirm and re-justify the reasons for the establishment of the EFCC. There's a report of policemen in the organization having to go back. Let us bear in mind that the CID, the Criminal Investigation Department of the police, has not been disbanded, it's still there. And so if EFCC is going to progressively become more specialized, it would be good if the core officers of the police, even the legislation will be altered so that it does not appear to be a department of the police. If people are trained professionally as investigators for special crimes and all that, then let that be the establishment. So one cannot speak of hope. One can only speak of watching his reflexes and drawing appropriate conclusions from them.
Okay. Well, Mr. Nzako, talking about the appointment of this young man, part of what the law says, the law all kind of benchmarks the appointment of the EFCC chairman against that of a police officer of a particular cadre. But in his presentation at the floor of the Senate, the new EFCC chairman said that he is a trained investigator, quote, with all the powers, privileges, and immunities of a police officer. How does that sit with you?
Well, when you talk about the issue of powers, privileges, and immunities of a police officer, of course, that presupposes that he realizes that once any crime is involved in any society, the first point of resort is the police. The police can only be activated once the crime is involved. So more or less, and that is why at the inception of EFCC, or rather even before EFCC, police were handling all matters relating to economic and financial crimes. And in the wisdom of the federal government, they felt they had to create a special branch, a special arm of government, so to speak, a special arm of the executive, to handle the issues of economic and financial crimes in the heydays of unbridled and on one-term 419 activities, advanced fee fraud that was affecting Nigeria's integrity, Nigeria's image, and Nigeria's economy. So EFCC, more or less, if one sees that as an offshoot of the police, it's not a bad assessment. And that is why until this latest appointment, all the heads of EFCC have been drawn from the police force. And going forward, now that EFCC has gotten its own bite over time, it has gotten its own firm stand, it has gotten its own direction, try as much as possible to carry itself without the nature and manner of the Nigerian police force, and try as much as possible to assert itself as an agency that is there for all. Nigerians expect that going forward, EFCC will not drop on its oars in ensuring that economic and financial crimes are tackled to the letter. And that is to mean that all those issues that led Nigerians to be very skeptical about the activities of policemen should not be seen in EFCC, and which is one, high-handedness in operations, two, favoritism in handling of matters, three, ensuring that it does not pander to the whims and caprices of his appointers, and ensure that he becomes fair and just to all manner of persons, and ensure that there is internal decorum within the rank and file of the operatives of EFCC. Because part of the challenges of security agencies in Nigeria is when there is lack of internal decorum, when the head cannot absolutely direct the followers on ethics and ethos of the organization. So the task ahead of Mr. Bawa, if I may go there, is to ensure that the ethics and ethos of EFCC is maintained in integrity, in consistency, such that the expectations of Nigerians will not be dashed. My brother from Abuja said that Nigerians have grown very skeptical about the activities of EFCC. And what has caused that skepticism? When there is unfairness, when there is sectionalism in handling of affairs, when people are perceiving EFCC as being the attack dog of the government in power, people will naturally carpet EFCC and not give it the much desired respect and cooperation that it deserves. Because for every security and anti-corruption agency that must strive on intelligence gathering and cooperation of the people, once the people are not on the same page, do not have the confidence of have confidence in that organization, the organization will not do so well and will not impress the expectations of the people.
So, I mean, the EFCC is entering its second decade. In a couple of years now, it will be 2 decades since the establishment of the EFCC. So different leaderships have come and gone. You have tried to detail this vis-a-vis the expectations of Nigerians. So for this new chairman, one of the major tasks before him will be to steer the commission away from the controversy we saw with the previous leadership, talking about the former acting chairman of the EFCC. Recall that a panel was set up, a panel concluded its job, a report was presented to the president. We don't know what came out of that report, and that has been a major issue. So if I can begin with Dr. Ikechukwu, because he talked about the EFCC becoming more professionalized, more specialized. If you cast your mind back at what played out with the former acting chairman and now this new chairman and his appointment, the process, do you think this might, tell on the internal decorum which Mr. Nkazo spoke about?
Possibly. I get the impression, listening to the new chairman and from what you've seen of his profile, that he's likely not to want to create a situation where the negative mileage of the history of the EFCC will follow him. But there are problems which we are not looking at, which he needs to look at. Part of it is the challenge of inter-agency cooperation in the work of the EFCC. If there's a case to be investigated, an ICPC is in the case, and EFCC is in the case, there's been situations where you may not even have enough data from both sides to make a case, and both sides would want to establish were the ones who did it. You find the same thing going on with the military. The other thing is to look at the statutes. Yes, my colleague in Lagos has referred correctly to the fact that the police has to deal with crime and criminality. But I think there has been far less attention, less proper attention to the laws setting up many institutions in the country. If you take the statute for the civil defense, you take the one for NDLEA, you take the one for EFCC and several other organizations and the police, you find to your dismay that they actually have practically the same powers with reference to arrest, to detention, and all of that. And it affects negatively crime management and crime fighting efficiency. That's part of where he needs to look at. Then within the EFCC itself, he has to do a thorough staff capacity audit and then thorough staff disposition, emotional and professional audit. And I think Nigerians should, if we are serious about helping the EFCC and the ICPC, there should be a very deliberate campaign that should lead to a policy changing completely the pay packet of those two organizations, among others. If you look at the salary structure and look at the risks they take, you look at the kind of crimes they have to commit, they have to fight, the kind of monies they need to recover. This is not about settling them. It is about paying them so well that anybody should misstep, there will be no excuse for it. So these are things he should push. Their job is extremely risky. People could kill you out of desperation. I want to contest elections. There's some crime I committed, and the operatives of that organization are following me. The fellow could arrange and have them shot. Also, people may be under such pressures that with all these risks, they can't even keep a roof over there. These are things to consider. Progressive professionalization, economic isolation in terms of economic empowerment, and then let them be at par with their colleagues all over the world who are doing the same kind of work. With the exposure the new chairman has, with his age, and the much that's coming out, it is hoped that he will not carry part of the negative baggage of the history of that organization in recent times. It is for him. His future lies far ahead of him. He's only 40. So he must know that what he does within the next 4 years could make him part of the future of a better Nigeria, or bury him as somebody who is biologically young, but who is also part of the old generation that has created the problems we are dealing with today.
But just how can he achieve this without getting swept away by the politics of the profession? Because you have alluded to that. I mean, this position is one that is, it has a lot of spotlight on it, and you can imagine the interests that are staring at him now and trying to make a go for him. So how can he achieve, these policy direction changes and the other things you've pointed out without getting swept away by the politics?
The thing is that he has to, first of all, sit down and understand his operating environment. If he moves immediately with a lot of idealism, he'll be blown out of the water. Sit down, do an audit of the organization. Look at what it is that created problems for the EFCC all along. You find that in all the cases and all the issues that gave them negative mileage, there were individuals involved. Assess the reach and network of those individuals. Among those individuals, find those you can approach with logic. That, sir or ma, these matters pertaining to Mr. X, these are the details. It will blow open eventually. I think you should back out of it for your image. For others, you find what their history is. You pick up their file and go and look at some of the content of the file and say, sir or ma, on the basis of this, which is really not an issue at the moment, I will advise you to be of good behavior so that it doesn't become an issue. He must be methodical the way genuine investigators of international repute carry their work out. By the time you do that and disaggregate, you isolate and reduce them into small groups, neutralize some of them by that reasoning such that those who were drawing strength from them can no longer draw the strength. And before anybody knows it, the consensus around criminality and fraud will begin to disintegrate. So he has to calibrate his intervention over time. In the short term, let me understand what's going on here. Let me understand the major drivers. Let me understand their interest. Maybe the interest is even misunderstood. By the time you've done all supposing he's posted as to be in charge of customs at Semeboda. If he goes there and starts running up and down talking on social media, he's wasting his time. He should meet with traditional rulers and all of. Now, I'm talking about if it's customs. Traditional rulers in the area, youth leaders, smugglers even, because some of them are known. So just like as we posted to deal with crime, there are stakeholders in criminality and fraud in Nigeria. Divide them among those who are desperate, driven to crime by want, those who think it's their business to always hold the state and milk it, those who stand in between. You start with those who stand in between. Hey, this is not good for you. Get out of it. We are going to deal with you. So that's how to go about it. But if he's on the TV every day, on radio every day, on social media, he will scandalize himself. Also, the media trial that has become part of the history, perceived history of the EFCC, he has to step it down very, very dramatically. People have a reputation to maintain which could determine their livelihood until you've made a case against them. But to rush to the press in order to say, oh, see, EFCC, can't you see we're in the media today? No. Part of the work, I imagine, should also be some measure of reorientation for the public. So these are things he has to take into account. EFCC media output should change under him. EFCC media releases should be slightly shorter than what they've been for a long time. EFCC response to comments from the public should not suggest that EFCC is combative. If you notice, if somebody has an issue and he makes a statement, the next thing that comes in the press is some form of threat, or at least language that's not as civil as it ought to be, which does not remove the fact that the spokespersons and the public communications department of the agency have been doing a very good job. In fact, if some agencies are as active as them, people will be more informed about what they're doing. But here we're now talking about propriety. The fact that perceptions and profile and image of people are involved. I would expect that under him, young, well-trained, that we should have an EFCC that treats everybody, particularly those it is investigating, with dignity and respect. That will give us a sense of improvement in the functions of the Nigerian state, particularly in the matter of crime detection, fraud detection, and the investigation.
Well, you began the other time, Dr. Ikechukwu, by talking about policies and politics, but we'll come to that in a bit. Let me take Mr. Zako up on this one. Well, part of the mandate of the EFCC is, of course, to combat financial and economic crimes with the sole objective of fighting corruption in Nigeria. Now, a good number of people might say, okay, that's the task. Fight corruption. But the challenge has been, over the past 20 years or thereabout, preventing could have been easier, or is it more difficult to prevent than to fight corruption? I know there are, there are laws that the EFCC is supposed to enforce, the Money Laundering Act, Advanced Fee Fraud Law, failed banks, miscellaneous offenses, and all of that. But there isn't. It doesn't seem like there is a law to prevent corruption from happening as opposed to fighting it.
There are enough laws in Nigeria to prevent commission of economic and financial crimes. You've mentioned quite a number of them. And
just a moment.
Yes.
Are those laws mentioned just now, are they to prevent or to tell you the consequences in the event that you do?
Both the laws and the policies. Essentially, most of the laws go to let you know what will happen if one commits any crime. But the policies and programs of government will tell you and will put safety nets that will prevent anyone from committing crime. Take, for example, the issue of, in the public sector, you can look at the issue of budgeting, look at the issue of for such of the word to use when there is contract to be awarded, for example, and then there is this office that handles that to ensure that due process, yes, that's the word, that due process is followed. Those are policies and programs that ordinarily should dissuade anybody. But a situation where human beings, in the midst and in the presence of all those laws, would, for personal gains and aggrandizement, want to still commit the offenses. That is where the fight now comes. Because when one is given the option, you either do this and you receive this, or you don't do it and you are free. If the individual decides to do it over and against the provisions of the laws and the policies that are in place, and then the next thing is to fight the fellow, because the fellow would have breached that protocol and that provision.
If the law,
yes.
Just a moment, sir. If the law is supposed to prevent, and we have done a lot more fighting than, well, it would seem like we have done a lot more fighting than preventing, does that suggest that the preventive powers of the laws are weak?
It suggests that the citizens themselves are not yet ready to have a better society. Because the preventive powers have to be implemented by the citizens themselves, especially the leadership, the authorities. Those are the helm of affairs. Because the local parlance, they say the fish rottens from the head. Where the head is aimed at ensuring that there is prevention of act of criminality, then the rest will follow. In which case, if anyone doesn't follow, then it will be easy to whip such fellow in line. Let's take, for example, in various states. If the governor does not put his hand in the cookie jar, you want to tell me that the commissioners and the directors would be as corrupt as they are today? If the leadership of any environment is clean and tries to whip everybody under him or her in line, then it becomes easy for everybody to follow suit. But where the head, where the leadership is found wanting, then it becomes a free-for-all for everybody. Well, and that is why it is very important that while we make the laws for prevention, the laws that will attack and fight the committal of such crime will also be made manifest and be made strong. And I just have a responsibility to assist EFCC.
Okay.
In terms of funding.
We'll come to that part, where Nigerians have to play their own role. But then there is another question here, which is it the question of laws now or structures that will prevent the acts of corruption? But we'll take that on when we return from this break. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Dr. Ikechukwu, let's take this on now. You've talked about the policies and the politics. Let's ebb into that gradually now. We know that there are policies, there are laws that empower the EFCC to do their jobs the way they ought to do it, to fight corruption. But then, as Mr. Zako has said, there is also the need for us to consider the preventive powers of those laws for which there are deterrents. Clearly, it would look like with all the cases and all the rampant and abundant, if I can, for lack of a better word, corruption, it would seem like the deterrents are not strong enough. Is it a problem of the laws or policies, or a problem of the institutions that are supposed to deter people from getting into corruption in the first place? This would have made EFCC's job a lot easier.
No, it's not the law. And it's also not the, the institutions. It is the fact that the Nigerian state, as it exists today, and this has been on for over 2 decades, has progressively metamorphosed into a well-organized criminal enterprise, whereby misconduct has become attractive. People in public office are the wrong role models for the upcoming generation, and everybody keeps quiet about it. It didn't start today. At a point in our history, some young men took guns and killed respected leaders. It occurred several times. Those young men, we describe them as Your Excellencies after they took violent possession of the state. And progressively, under democracy, what do we have? We see rigged elections. Do we not have laws saying elections should not be rigged? And we also address them as say that distinguished or Your Excellencies after this has happened. So no society develops because it has laws. Societies develop because of how people behave. So when you make a law, and even the lawmaker himself violates it, you don't have any law. So coming back to the substantive issue of why criminality and fraud is growing, and whether it's not even preventive intervention that will help, you cannot prevent what is sustaining an environment. Criminality, at all levels, is what is actually sustaining the environment in which we live today. If you're driving on the road and somebody in uniform stops you, is it possible he can let you go if you give him something? The answer is yes. If you win an election and you go to your village and tell the people, yes, I've won the election, we are now to make laws, and somebody comes and asks you for 5 million naira to start a business, knowing that your pay packet is not anywhere near that, and that happens for over and over. As a minister, whether as somebody won election as a minister, your people say you're a failure. So the very expectations of the people also mean that you actually cannot be upright. But the people who are making these demands, including yourself, if you're the special guest of honor at an anti-corruption event, you read a 40-minute paper on how Nigeria will be a wonderful place, on the damage corruption and fraud are doing to Nigeria, and so many other things. So all of these things are going on while the law is there. So the thing for us to really keep in view is that it is self-deception to celebrate laws instead of proper behavior. Like Nzako said from your studio in Lagos, we have enough laws. If you really want to pursue the matter, there was no need to set up any other anti-crime anything if the police CID department had been doing its work, which it was doing over the years. Of course, the EFCC came into being not just because of wanting to fight crime. There were also international demands when the Obasanjo government was asking for debt relief and all of that. So that's why it's not entirely right for it to be tied to the police. So on the question of laws, on the question of prevention, on the question of institutions, we have institutions today very well set up. The laws are good. We have laws enough to contain all the crimes in Nigeria. The quality of Nigeria's human capital, the reflexes of the leadership, the behavior patterns that are celebrated explain why criminality grows. Look at we have crime. Sorry, what do you call? We have robbery and banditry and kidnapping all over the place, and they are strongest in the states where, on a monthly basis, the governors ferret away between 500 million and 1-point-something billion in the name of security votes. When people are watching this, for them, as far as they are concerned, this is slush fund. And with slush fund, you can't contain anybody and ask him or her to be of good behavior. It's going on. Under P2B, he also had the security vote, but what did he do with it? He bought patrol vehicles for every community, gave them equipment to work with. That's how that money was spent. So a number of people were seeing him spending the money on security, community. He wasn't running it from his office. And then in any case, that's even after cutting down the amount he inherited. Look all over the Federation. Look at where children are being kidnapped on a daily basis. The police is also overstretched. So we should stop kidding ourselves. Oh, we have the laws, the EFCC. Please, to be fair to the new EFCC chairman, nobody should expect him to perform a miracle in 2 minutes. The rot is deep. Let us not make any new laws. There are enough flaws. Let those in positions of responsibility become better examples. Let the management of public resources show result on the life of the people. And you look, we managed COVID. What happened to the palliatives? They were in warehouses. We are told inflation has gone down. We are told the Naira is swimming up. Ask not what we're saying in ministries. Ask what your cousins in the village are spending on a cup of rice. Those are the kind of narratives that will begin to make people believe there's government, that there's leadership, etc. So it's not about making new laws. It's not about institutions. It's about the quality of the human person, the kind of examples those in leadership are setting, the kind of demands they encourage from those who are leading. When a governor has 800 special assistants all over the state, he never sees any of them, but each of them gets 250,000 a month. Are you not ruining the next replacement generation, giving them the impression that leadership is about free, unearned income and privileges? Those are the challenges. A rotten society will not lift itself to heaven just by making a new law. People must change. That change needs to occur at all levels. Too much damage has been done. We run a criminal enterprise today in the name of a state and leadership, and everybody is pretending that one day it will go away. It will not go away. Somebody must eventually do something about the pay packet of the National Assembly members. Somebody must eventually tell us why, after 20 years of democracy, all the federal roads in the Federal Republic of Nigeria are bad as I'm speaking to you. And nearly all of them, sections of them had been bad for that 20 years. Those are the core issues. Don't pick up the young man and start talking about corruption as if it's something that is not about stealing. No, corruption is primarily the distortion of values. Our values are distorted, and so further extensions of that distortion could turn out in the form of misapplication, wrong access to and custodianship of public funds. It's not about thief catching. It's about changing a society to act responsibly.
Clearly, a job of work ahead of us. But Mr. Nzako, leaning on that statement from Dr. Ikechukwu saying you cannot prevent what is sustaining an environment, as a lawyer, how hard will it be to prosecute that thing that is sustaining an environment? I mean, you've been practicing, so just how hard is it? If we're going to solve this, then we need to look at those different areas. Just how hard is it?
The first and fundamental place that we need to start from, going by the beautiful analysis by my brother, Dr. Ikechukwu, is to start from the reward and punishment approach. The reward and punishment approach in Nigeria is terribly skewed to the extent that those who do the right things are not adequately rewarded. Those who do the wrong things are not adequately punished. And all we are seeing in the modern day Nigeria is that even those who do the wrong things, the criminals tend to be rewarded these days, all in the name of, for a bandit, so to speak, to be making claims and making demands of restitution, making demands of amnesty, making demands of ransom, making demands of payout, tells you that what it simply means, and for each step that is taken in that direction, that wrongs are being rewarded and rights are being ignored. Any society that does not hold its reward and punishment system in good stead, that society will not get out of crimes and criminality. So one of the major fundamental things we need to do is to ensure that good people are adequately rewarded and bad people are adequately punished. The punishment comes from the court of law. The punishment comes from the stipulations of the laws. If the law says this is the punishment for so and so crime, we have to ensure that that fellow is adequately punished. But the situation where there is so much politics in the polity, like my brothers earlier alluded to, where somebody commits an offense and instead of the person being adequately punished, the person is shielded by the Godfather. The person is shielded by those who have benefited from the committal of that offense. Take, for example, the issue of electoral fraud. Who benefit from electoral brigandage? Who benefit from the rigging? It is the big man that is eventually elected in quote. And the same big man goes to court, throws around his muscles, and ensures that he gets confirmation by the judicial system over and against what is actually on the ground. And then the actual person who had ordinarily won the election and who would have served the people well in honesty, truth, and conscience, good conscience, to ensure that the society moves better. Like I earlier said, that the fish rottens from the head. When the wrong people are elected in positions of authority, do not expect the society to change because they present the wrong roles, the wrong models, the wrong schemes, the wrong schedules for the younger ones to follow and for the followers to emulate. So we need to not only get it right at our reward and punishment system, we also have to get it right, extremely right, at our point of deciding who leads. At any point, who is given that responsibility to lead.
Maybe we shouldn't look that far, Mr. Nzako. I mean, looking at the process of arriving at a new leader for the EFCC, there was a previous one, an acting chairman, who was accused of being corrupt. A panel was set up. Investigation was conducted. A report was presented to the president, but the former acting chairman was neither acquitted nor punished. So, building this on that, what do you make of it?
I think it is a failure on the side of government to clean up the Ogian staple before bringing in Mr. Abdulrasheed Bawa on board, and that is why so many people don't even know that the committee led by Justice Ayo Issa Salami had even presented its report to the presidency, and then the snipers we're getting is that the government is even acting on some of the recommendations of that report by, one, ensuring that outsiders do not come to run the show in EFCC, and two, not to appoint policemen anymore to head EFCC. So that is the very much we could get from the recommendations of that committee. But as we speak...
Apologies, Mr. Nzako, if
yes.
you don't mind me butting in. Well, you know, beyond that recommendation that you just talked about, it would seem like this urgent stable has been still from the very beginning. I mean, because this is what has happened over time, and people, all previous EFCC chairmen have always had to leave one way or another in controversial circumstances. And just as you were saying, there is never really any closure in the mind of many people, you know, millions of Nigerians who are aware of what happened to the EFCC chairman before the person leaves the seat. So this stable that we are doing, that you are talking about now, are you calling for some kind of reform?
Well, Ayo, the reforms are... Reform is an unending thing, is always work in progress because there's always room for change, especially positive change. What we see in EFCC is that there's always what they call the proverbial banana peels. But while the responsibility and the job of the leadership of EFCC is heavy, it is made lighter when there is internal decorum, when there is justice, when there is fairness to all, and when there is consistency in integrity. And that is why we will ask the new chairman to step on toes, but not to step on the banana peels. Because the banana peels have thrown down former leadership of EFCC, not once, not twice, not thrice, and then each one has gone in controversial circumstances, like you earlier said. But then, toes must be stepped upon. And for every toe that he stepped upon, the toe will now fight back in what you media men call corruption fighting back. And then, because corruption will always try to fight back, it now lays banana peels ahead of the chairman ahead of the leadership. And then if the chairman missteps and steps on that banana peel, he will fall and will fall disgracefully. So he has to be very conscious of that peel. While stepping on toes, he should avoid stepping on the peels. That way, we expect him to succeed in his assignment.
We could go on and on about this, especially this banana peel that you talked about. It sounds like what Dr. Ikechukwu also referenced earlier, but it's, as you said, it's an ongoing conversation. We will definitely pick this up another time, but at this moment, we have to thank you very much for your time and your thoughts this morning. Mr. Fred Zako is a legal practitioner, joined us from our studio here in Lagos, as well as Dr. Oke Ikechukwu, Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. He joined us from Abuja. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts this morning.
Thank you.
Sunrise Daily continues in a moment. Do stay with us.